And if you look and see what's happening in Greece right now, you're watching the slow motion end of democracy in Greece. Okay? What's happened is the international bankers have stepped in and they have said, we're sorry, Mr. Greek Parliament, you no longer run this country. We're sorry, Greek citizens, you no longer control what will happen in Greece. We are going to now run Greece from Brussels. And we're going to tell you what to do. We're going to tell you how to do it. And you no longer have your sovereignty, Greece. And if you think that can't happen here in the United States of America, you are fooling yourself. Because I believe what we're really battling here is a group of international bankers who at some point will demand to have their money. And they will say, you will pay those bills, and they're going to do it by strapping our children and grandchildren with super high taxes. They're going to destroy the currency, as Jerry has said, but they're going to do it by eroding and taking away your birthright as an American citizen. And they're going to take away our sovereignty, they're going to take away our control, and it is a fundamental threat to America as we know it. So it's a much bigger issue, I think, in the long term. And I think it's important for all of us that are involved in this campaign to understand that.
Thank you, Floyd. Judson, you want to come up here?
One other thing, One other thing, the gentleman made the comment about what the media is going to do to us. This kills me that nobody talks about this. If the No More Red Ink campaign is successful, you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to see videos of Joseph Farah pushing his grandmother over a cliff, okay? Well, what's the response to that? Well, there's a great response because that triggers on one emotion, fear. Well, there's a stronger emotion called anger. A year ago, the Government Accounting Office released a report that said there's hundreds of billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and duplication of services in the government. Where's that gone? Nowhere. This is the first thing that should be cut when we start cutting No More Red Ink. We can cut that. How many cylinders are there out there that we can cut? I mean, Jerry talked about it, hundreds of billions of dollars through Cylindra and through other black holes like that. This is where we're going to start cutting money, but this is the message that has to get out there. We have to start with the messaging now. We have to be aggressive with it. So, sir, that's kind of the answer to your question.
Was there another question back there?
If you could stand, too.
Thank you.
Yeah, just talk into it.
Okay. So, thank you for having this discussion here. I'm probably one of the few younger people here that are can appreciate this. Now, one of the things that I think is a problem is that, just to quote a verse from the Bible in Ecclesiastes, the person that has too much wisdom brings a burden onto themselves. And what I mean by this is everything that you're saying very well may be true, especially about the international level of coordination going on here. But if we present that just carte blanche to the public, people shut down and think conspiracy theory and think all these other things. So I'm all for the No More Red Ink campaign. I'm with my brother growing a blog and a presence that we're reaching thousands of people through social media. And I want to support this, but what kind of practical ways can we get this out in a way that we don't turn off more people than we bring in?
Well, what Floyd was talking about is what's actually happening right now. You can see it for yourself. It's not a conspiracy theory. What's happening in Greece, that's one of the things we should point Americans toward, to say, is this where you want to go? Because this is where we're headed. If we don't get our spending under control and our borrowing under control, there's only one place we can go. We can go the way of Greece. And I think that's a very important concept. And secondly, of course, in Europe you've got the supranational institutions already set up. That's who's dealing with what's happening in Greece right now. But who's going to bail out America? Who's going to bail out America when America goes broke? I think these are concepts that Americans can understand. And again, we already have the American people behind this. All we got to do is tell them there's an outlet for expressing it more clearly. Honestly, in America today, there are very few things we have a consensus on. I mean, think about it. Political issues. The country's never been more schizophrenic than it is right now. I mean, we're really divided and separated. On this issue, there's unbelievable unity. There's really a consensus on this issue. When you've got Democrats and independents and Republicans, behind you, it's very unusual. So it's really about giving voice to this, giving them something they can do, which is what we try to do with this campaign. And again, nomoreredink.com. Go there if you haven't visited it. There's something for everybody to do there. There's initiatives that you can do yourself as an individual. There are initiatives you can do as an organization. If you've got, members of Congress, you can get them to sign this pledge. It's the simplest pledge, one sentence long, very unambiguous. Candidates for Congress, we need them getting on board. And there was one other question or comment? Somebody knew.
No, just a couple quick comments. I agree with the question of the young gentleman here and the original question about the messaging. And I like what your analogy was on the cancer. It's so easy to understand. I also like the Titanic analogy because they knew what was going to happen, right? And it was born out of arrogance. And they said that only God could sink this ship. And that's where we're headed.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask, I don't know if this is on.
No, it's on. It's for the camera.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask what you guys are doing with the private sector, because private companies are so dependent on T-bills for their money and borrowing money from the government to fund their operations. And I think it's really important to make the private sector understand how government borrowing affects them so much, because it makes us not only dependent on other countries for our money, but it makes us it makes our inflation soar because we don't have any of our actual money. We are printing money without even giving authorization to anyone. The Fed's just pouring money into the system without having anything to back it up. And I just think it's so important to inform the private sector. And I just wanted to know what kind of businesses you guys are working with and if they're helping you lobby and stuff like that. So.
Well, that is an excellent point because, it's funny, as the government's on this incredible borrowing spree that seems to be going on forever, private companies have a great deal of time borrowing money today, unless they're borrowing it from the government, as you point out. And, there is a cause and effect relationship there, and it's something I guess we can explore in more detail as this campaign unfolds. Was there any other comments, suggestions, questions?
Yeah, just a quick comment. David was talking about this being a cancer patient. To me, it's more like we're trying to treat a severe drunk. Because a drunk really has can't take responsibility for its own treatment. But on the other hand, if you cut the drunk off cold turkey, you have the danger of killing the patient. Right now, if we're borrowing $1 trillion a year, that's more than 5% of our GDP. So we're going to go from a very anemic 2% growth down to a -3%. This is really scary to me, and I agree that the cold turkey is the only way, but it's a dangerous situation.
It's actually right now $1.2 trillion, $1.2 trillion that we're borrowing annually. It's going up all the time. Next year it'll be probably 1.3 trillion at least. But the thing that Americans need to understand is that there's at least $2.3 trillion in revenues pouring into the Treasury every year as well. That's plenty of money to run a constitutionally limited government. That's way more than Bill Clinton had you know, during his 8 years in office. It's more than George W. Bush had, who was a profligate borrower as well. So, you know, it can be done. It needs to be done. It's the right thing to do. It's about increasing our liberties as well as being responsible stewards of what we have. Yes.
Can I take a shot at answering that question? This is going to be the big question. We agree with you, okay? Spending is out of control, but we need to do this slowly over time. This is going to be the big pitch from Republicans. I just want to make a quick historical analogy, okay? And this was portrayed nicely in the movie Amazing Grace about William Wilberforce and how they got rid of abolished slavery in Britain. He was a reformer. He brought up the abolition 11 times in 16 years, okay? And it built over time to where toward the end, the entire country was in favor of abolishing slavery. People wouldn't drink tea because the sugar was made in the plantations. Even the parliament said, yes, you're right, this is bad. They made speeches, this is barbaric. But it's so intertwined with our economy, we can't do this all at once. We need to do this slowly. So, and it's just, it never happened. And in the end, even though there was unanimity, it was not going to happen. It was not going to ever happen the way they were going. And in their case, what they did was William Wilberforce's brother-in-law was the sharp lawyer that had an idea, a very outside-the-box idea of essentially tricking. They came in from left field with a bill, an anti-French bill, because Britain was at war with France then, and essentially it's kind of complicated, but what they did was they dried up the slave trade. They put a lot of the slavers out of business because they wouldn't allow them to run these neutral flags and all that. But the net effect of it was they found an outside-the-box way to dry up the slave trade, and the next time it brought up, it was almost unanimous, and they abolished slavery in Britain. But if they just gone and tried to go through the front door and explain each time, says, no, we need to do this, the more arguments were made. They were agreed with by everybody, but the MPs wouldn't do it because they were too enmeshed in it. They had personal interests and financial equity interests and all this. It wasn't going to happen. That's why the argument that we need to do this over time, I don't believe it's going to happen. We're in such crisis, I think you simply have to do it, and it's radical, and the answer to, but we have to, people are going to lose jobs, all this stuff is going to happen that is going to be very disruptive. You say, yes, it will, and it's 1,000 times better than what will happen if we don't, and you have to paint the picture of what will happen if we don't do that. Because it's like, you know, it's the old economist, the broken window thing, where you try to explain the economic benefits of the broken window. You have to explain also what would have happened to that money if you didn't break the window. If you know, this is the classic picture of why, you know, why deficit spending is a good thing. So that's my answer to that. You're going to have a very persuasive argument to go against the idea that we're with you. We just need to do it slowly, because I don't believe slowly will ever happen. You got questions here?
In my mind, it comes down also to a matter of education. You know, when you say that we're spending more than $1 trillion per year than we bring in, you know, everyone kind of gets, yeah, $1 trillion is a lot of money, but do they understand it? If you said $4 billion a day, if you broke it down into a per hour, if you broke it down into a per minute, if you started to educate the public so that they have these factual arguments to fight back with, and say, well, you know, do you want to spend this money? Do you want to borrow this much money every minute of every day? It might be an easier sell, and it might be an easier way to defeat the media.
Did you want to respond to that, or?
I couldn't agree with you more. The thing is, but it's true that the American people already get this. It's Washington we've got to convince. That's why this campaign is directed to putting elected officials, elected Republican officials in Washington on the line. It's calling their bluff. Because as David says, they will try to say, we can't do this overnight. You know, it took a long time getting ourselves into this fix, and we've got to wean ourselves away from the debt. That's what the Paul Ryan plan was. And we have to recognize that you can't fix a borrowing problem by continuing to borrow. That's the fundamental flaw in the idea that you have to wean yourself off of this borrowing over time. But you're absolutely right. It's $100 billion a month now. $100 billion is a lot of money. I mean, I think that's about the equivalent of what we spent on the Iraq War, which is a massive, undertaking. Elizabeth, did you want to? No. Oh, okay.
I think this is an education campaign, and it has to be intense. And the use of examples and visuals and metaphors and historical examples is very, very important, because, yes, it is true that the American people want this to stop, but the scare tactics, which will not just be, you're throwing your grandmother over the cliff in a wheelchair, but it will be, I think the most logical thing will be to say that it's impossible to do this. How do you cut $1 trillion? What will that look like? And if we don't have the answers, which the answers are there, but if we don't have the answers, and if the American people can't individually espouse those answers and articulate them, explain them themselves. So what we need to do is arm them. You said Heritage and Cato, put together some white papers, but it needs to be more than the white papers that are given to policy wonks. It also, and others, it needs to be pithy, short, retorts, explanations, and metaphors that will put the idiots who want to scare people away from the obvious truth back in their place and on the defensive. I think a couple of points that should be made is, we live in the Washington, D.C. metroplex. Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. are so darned prosperous, it almost makes me sick. My housing values should have been destroyed in the last, several years, but they're not. I live in one of the 2 fastest growing counties economically in the country. Why is that? Because trillions of dollars are being poured indefensibly, unconstitutionally into our economy, and it's never going to end. I'm looking for some property, a large building in downtown Washington, D.C. I've come to find out from real estate agents that the property values in Washington, D.C. are only rivaled by downtown Manhattan in the entire United States. They keep building the biggest buildings and filling them up overnight with more and more departments and millions of, or hundreds of thousands of workers and lobbyists, and that is never going to end. All that's going to happen if you cut $1 trillion is it's going to put our city into an economic, a blip, a slight depression, recession. That's okay. It's a very good thing. It is not going to affect the heartland any other way, the rest of the country, other than to stimulate those economies, as someone else so worthily said. So that was a couple of points I would make.
I came in a little bit late, but in Manhattan, I live in New York. It's crazy. But in a prior life, I was a bond trader, I was a bond analyst, and what you say is 100% true, and the canary in the coal mine is the fact that when the interest on our debt, and this might have been discussed, I don't know if it was, but when the interest on our debt resumes its normal path, which is not 0.25%, but the yield curve is normally going to be 3 to 6%, that $1 trillion of debt, but I don't think the American public understands that. Right. I was speaking with the son of a liberal friend of mine last night, and we were having an argument. And he believes in a utopian world where the government takes care of everybody. And I was trying to explain that you have limits on the amount of debt that you can issue. But I don't think the American public understands the yield curve, and I don't think they understand what 1% increase in our you spending $100 billion a month. That's unsustainable at any other interest rate than where we are now. So I think that needs to be articulated. And true, the the cures are going to be painful, but if it takes until the X time, it's going to be that much more painful. So.
So would you like another question?
This is part question, part comment. I mean, I agree with everything that we've been saying here. Have you considered how to engage the church in this as well? Because as much as an economic issue, this is a moral issue. And for a lot of Christians, the Bible is the final authority on such matters. And the Bible is very clear, debt is bad. And stealing, exactly. And so there's great opportunity to illustrate this as both debt and stealing related, therefore moral. So have you considered that, or I don't know, just kind of?
Well, I would love to address that at some length. We're running out of time, but I will say that you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm one of the proponents of the idea that all issues that we deal with politically are moral issues. We have this kind of crazy mindset that somehow economic issues and moral issues are, two different kinds of issues. Economics is a moral issue, absolutely, and it is something we've got to impress upon the church. That's a very difficult task, as you probably know. That's one of the things where the church seems to disengage from economic issues, as if there's some moral ambiguity involved with economics, when I think the Bible speaks more directly to economic issues than almost anything besides salvation. So, but there you go. I do want to wrap up because you've all been very patient and attentive, and we're running out of videotape, and we're going to lose this room in a little bit. But I do want to just reemphasize one thing: nomoreredink.com. Spread it far and wide to your friends and Facebook and every means that you have to let people know about this campaign. I will promise you that we're going to step this thing up in terms of media visibility, in terms of outreach in the coming months. I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing. I'm not getting people, when I approach people about this, leaders, members of Congress, there is not a lot of resistance to it. It's very difficult to say this is a bad idea and still maintain any kind of moral integrity. And that's what I like about it. I think we're at a crossroads where we're either going to choose the right path or the wrong path. That's why we've looked at 2012 as such an important year. But it's not just important in terms of who we choose as president. It's what we choose as a path for the future. Thank you all very much for coming, and God bless.